My phone started vibrating before sunrise. Not one notification. Not two. 27 missed calls. All from work. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before putting the phone back down. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going to answer, because less than 24 hours earlier, my boss had made one thing painfully clear. Stop fixing problems that aren't assigned to you. So I did exactly what he wanted. And by 8 o'clock the next morning, the entire order processing system had crashed. Millions of dollars in shipments were frozen. Customers were furious. Executives were demanding answers. And suddenly, everyone wanted to know where I was. Welcome to Karma Stories Hub Official, where we bring you the most shocking Reddit stories, unbelievable betrayals, emotional confessions, and satisfying revenge stories. My name is Ethan. 3 years ago, I landed what felt like the perfect job. I worked for a national logistics company outside Chicago. Nothing glamorous, just thousands of shipments moving every hour through warehouses across the country. I wasn't a manager. I wasn't even a senior engineer. Officially, I was just a systems analyst. Unofficially, I was the guy who quietly kept everything running. Whenever strange errors appeared, I'd investigate. Whenever software updates broke something, I'd stay late fixing it. Whenever another department accidentally deleted critical files, I'd recover everything before anyone even noticed. Most people never knew how close the company came to disaster, almost every week. And honestly, I preferred it that way. I liked solving problems. Recognition wasn't important. At least, that's what I believed. Things changed when our department got a new operations manager. His name was Derek. The first thing Derek did wasn't learning how our systems worked. It wasn't meeting the team. It wasn't asking questions instead. He gathered everyone into the conference room. He smiled confidently. "I don't believe in overcomplicating things." Everyone nodded politely. "I expect people to stay in their lane." Another nod. "If something isn't your responsibility," he continued, "don't touch it." That sentence stuck with me, because our department only survived precisely because people helped outside their job descriptions. But Derek didn't care. He loved structure, rules, titles, permission. If your job description didn't mention it, he believed it shouldn't exist. Within weeks, small problems started piling up. Printer outages, database warnings, inventory sync delays, tiny issues. Normally, I'd fix them in minutes. Now, I had to file tickets, wait for approval, then wait for another team. Simple fixes suddenly took days. Everyone became frustrated. Customers waited longer. Employees complained. Derek called it process improvement. One afternoon, my coworker Lisa rolled her chair over to my desk. "You already know what's wrong with Warehouse Sync, don't you?" I nodded. "Takes 5 minutes. So fix it." "I can't." She frowned. "Why?" "Derek," she sighed. "I hate this place." About a month later, our overnight monitoring dashboard showed something unusual. Storage usage was climbing rapidly, far faster than normal. At first, I assumed it was a reporting error. Then I checked again. Same result. I dug deeper. One backup server wasn't deleting temporary files anymore. Instead, it was quietly storing everything. Hour after hour. Day after day. It wasn't dangerous yet, but if nobody fixed it, The storage array would eventually reach capacity. When that happened, automated processing would stop. Orders, invoices, shipping labels, everything. I estimated we had about 2 weeks before serious trouble. Maybe less. I documented everything. Screenshots, logs, graphs, predictions, possible solutions. The report was nearly 15 pages. I emailed Derek. Subject line: urgent storage capacity risk. He replied 20 minutes later. Received. Nothing else. No meeting. No questions. No approval. Nothing. 3 days later, I followed up. Still nothing. Another 2 days passed. Storage climbed higher. I walked into Derek's office. He barely looked away from his laptop. What? I wanted to discuss the storage issue. I saw your email. It's becoming serious. So, if we don't clear those temporary files, he interrupted. Did I assign this to you? No. Then why are you working on it? I blinked. I monitor system health. You monitor? Yes. You don't redesign infrastructure. I'm not redesigning anything. You understand my point. I honestly didn't. I'm trying to prevent an outage. He leaned back. Ethan! His voice became colder. I've noticed a pattern. What pattern? You spend too much time fixing everyone else's problems. They become my problems when the system fails. They aren't. Silence. Then he delivered the sentence that would change everything. Stop fixing things that aren't assigned to you. I stared at him. You want me to ignore this? I want you to follow directions. And if something breaks? He shrugged. That's management's responsibility. I nodded slowly. Understood. He smiled. Good. As I walked back to my desk, Lisa looked up. Everything okay? I forced a smile. Perfect. She didn't believe me. Neither did I. That evening, I opened the monitoring dashboard one last time. Storage usage had reached 93%. The warning indicator turned orange. I could fix it. Honestly, it would take less than 15 minutes. Delete temporary files. Restart one service. Verify replication. Done. My cursor hovered over the maintenance button. Then I remembered Derek's words. Stop fixing things. I closed the window, shut down my computer, picked up my backpack, and walked out of the office. For the first time in years, I left work exactly on time. No overtime. No unpaid troubleshooting. No saving the company from itself. Just following orders. I had no idea how quickly those orders would come back to haunt everyone. The next morning, at exactly 5:42 a.m., my phone buzzed for the first time. It was Derek. My phone started vibrating. Before sunrise, I ignored it. A minute later, he called again. Then again. Then Lisa called. Then Human Resources. Then our IT director. By the time I finally got out of bed, I had more than 20 missed calls and a dozen text messages. The first text from Derek read, "Call me immediately. This is an emergency." The second one was less polite. "Where are you? The system is down." I quietly set the phone back on my nightstand. I wasn't scheduled to start work until 8 a.m., and for the first time since joining the company, I wasn't going to work for free. Chaos begins. When I arrived at the office, the atmosphere felt completely different. Normally, people joked while grabbing coffee. That morning, nobody smiled. Employees were running between departments. Phones rang non-stop. Managers were shouting across the room. Large monitors displayed nothing but bright red error messages. One warehouse after another had gone offline. Orders weren't processing. Shipping labels wouldn't print. Inventory couldn't sync. Customer service representatives had hundreds of angry callers waiting. The company had practically frozen. The moment I walked through the door, Lisa hurried toward me. "Ethan!" I looked at her calmly. "Morning. Where have you been?" "Driving to work." She lowered her voice. "Derek has been looking for you for 3 hours. I start at 8. She gave me a look that said, "Good point." The emergency meeting. A few minutes later, someone asked me to report to the executive conference room. Inside sat Derek, the IT director, the operations director, the chief financial officer, 2 senior engineers, our vice president. Everyone looked exhausted. Except Derek. He looked terrified. The vice president spoke first. "Ethan, we've been told you've been monitoring this storage issue." "Yes." "When did you first notice it?" "About 2 weeks ago." He frowned. "Did you report it?" "I did." I slid a printed copy of my original email across the table, then another, then the follow-up email, then the monitoring reports. The room became unusually quiet. The vice president slowly looked toward Derek. "You received these?" Derek cleared his throat. "I did. And I didn't think the issue was this serious." I stayed silent. The CFO leaned forward. "Ethan, can this be fixed?" "Yes." "How long?" "If nothing else is damaged." I paused. Around 15 minutes. Every head in the room turned toward me. Derek stared in disbelief. 15 minutes? I nodded. "I offered to do it last week." Nobody said a word. An uncomfortable question. The vice president folded his hands. "Why didn't you fix it yesterday?" I answered honestly. "Because I was instructed not to." Derek immediately interrupted. "That's not exactly what I meant." I looked directly at him. "You told me to stop fixing problems that weren't assigned to me." "I meant, you also asked if I had been assigned this issue." He remained silent. "I hadn't. So, I followed your instructions." The room became painfully quiet. No one defended Derek, because nobody could. The repair. The vice president nodded. "Please restore the system." I walked into the server room, connected my laptop, opened the maintenance console, deleted nearly 2 weeks of temporary files, restarted one background service, verified replication, watched storage usage fall from 99% to 42%. Green lights slowly returned across the monitoring dashboard. Warehouse after warehouse came back online. Shipping resumed. Orders began processing again. The entire repair took 12 minutes, not 15, 12. When I returned to the conference room, everyone looked relieved, except Derek. He knew exactly what had just happened. The executives had witnessed 2 things. First, the outage had been completely preventable. Second, their operations manager had ignored repeated warnings. Damage assessment. Unfortunately, bringing the system back online didn't erase the damage. The finance department spent the rest of the afternoon calculating losses. Delayed shipments, canceled orders, refund requests, emergency overtime, Contract penalties. By evening, the estimated financial impact exceeded $750,000, and that number continued climbing. Rumors spread. News travels fast inside large companies. By lunch, everyone knew. People whispered as I walked past. "That's the guy who warned them. I heard he tried to fix it. They wouldn't let him. I can't believe management ignored him." For the first time, people finally understood what I actually did every day. An unexpected visitor. Around 3 o'clock, the vice president stopped by my desk. "Can we talk?" I followed him into a small meeting room. He closed the door. "I owe you an apology." I looked surprised. "You do? We've clearly underestimated your role." "I was just doing my job." He smiled slightly. "It sounds like you were doing a lot more than your job." I didn't answer, because we both knew it was true. He placed a folder on the table. "I'd like you to explain exactly how many issues you've quietly prevented over the past 3 years. I laughed softly. "You really want that list?" "I do. It might take a while." "I've cleared my afternoon." The list for nearly 2 hours. I walked him through everything. Failed updates, security vulnerabilities, database corruption, backup failures, automation bugs, warehouse synchronization problems, vendor software defects, license expirations, server capacity issues, power redundancy concerns. Some problems had taken 5 minutes. Others had taken entire weekends. None of them had ever reached executive leadership, because I had fixed them before they became disasters. The vice president kept taking notes. Eventually, he stopped writing. He looked at me and quietly asked, "Does Derek know you've been handling all this?" I smiled. I assumed he did. A difficult conversation. Late that afternoon, Derek approached my desk. He looked nothing like the confident manager who had lectured me the previous week. "Ethan?" "Yes? Can we talk privately?" I followed him into an empty office. He closed the door for several seconds. He didn't say anything. Finally, he sighed. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I remained silent. "I may have misunderstood your responsibilities." "I see. I'd appreciate it if we could move past this." I nodded politely. "I'm happy to remain professional." He smiled. "Good." Then he added something that surprised me. "I'll need your help during tomorrow's executive review." There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just another request to clean up his mess. I simply replied, "I'll answer any questions I'm asked." His smile disappeared. He realized I wasn't going to protect him anymore. The executive review. The next morning, every department head gathered in the largest conference room in the building. A projector displayed one simple title: System Failure Review. Everyone knew someone's career was about to change. The only question was, whose? The conference room was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful. The kind that makes every cough sound loud. Every department head was there. The vice president, the CFO, the IT director, HR, operations, warehouse leadership, and Derek. He looked like he hadn't slept. There was a coffee cup in front of him, but it was still full. His leg bounced constantly under the table. The projector displayed a single slide. System failure. Root cause analysis. The vice president stood. "Before we begin, I want everyone to remember that this meeting isn't about assigning blame. He paused. It's about understanding how a preventable outage turned into one of the most expensive operational failures we've experienced in years. The room remained silent. Then he looked at me. Ethan, would you walk everyone through your timeline? The timeline. I connected my laptop to the projector. The first slide appeared. Day E. Storage utilization. Bifinder T-shirt E. Initial anomaly detected. I explained how I noticed the unusual growth, how I verified it wasn't a false alarm, how I investigated the backup server. No interruptions. Everyone listened. Second slide. Day R. Root cause identified. Temporary files were no longer being deleted. Estimated failure window, shear to Shersith days. Third slide. Copies of my email. Timestamp. Subject line. Urgent storage capacity risk. I explained exactly what I'd written. The screenshots. The predicted impact. The proposed solution. Fourth slide. Follow-up email. Sent 3 days later. Again. No response. Fifth slide. Meeting request. Declined. Sixth slide. Notes from my conversation with Derek. I had written them immediately after leaving his office. Date, time, location, everything. The vice president looked surprised. You documented the conversation? I document every technical decision that could affect production. He nodded slowly. Good practice. The conversation replayed. The vice president asked, "What exactly was said?" I opened my notebook. I asked for permission to clear the temporary files. And I was asked whether the task had been assigned to me. What did you say? I answered honestly. No. What happened next? I was instructed to stop fixing problems that weren't assigned to me. Silence. I continued. I asked if management wanted me to ignore the issue. They said, I was told to follow directions. I closed the notebook. That's exactly what I did. No one spoke. Derek's defense. The vice president finally turned toward Derek. Is any of Ethan's timeline inaccurate? Derek shifted uncomfortably. No, but I believed he was exaggerating the risk. The CFO leaned forward. Based on what? Technical analysis. Derek hesitated. I didn't conduct one. So why ignore the report? I thought he was overreacting. The IT director asked quietly. Did you ask anyone from infrastructure to review it? No. Did you escalate it? No. Did you even read the entire report? Another pause. Not completely. Several executives exchanged glances. That answer hurt him more than anything else. The second surprise. The vice president turned back to me. Ethan, you mentioned yesterday that this wasn't the first issue you've quietly prevented. Correct. Can you elaborate? I took a deep breath. I created a summary. He smiled. I suspected you might. I handed printed copies to everyone. The title read, Major Incidents Prevented Last 3 Years. The list covered 7 pages. Every issue, every date, estimated financial impact, time required to fix, supporting documentation. It wasn't exaggerated. If anything, I'd left smaller issues off the list. People slowly flipped through the pages. One executive whispered, 38 incidents? Another replied, and that's only the documented ones. The CFO looked up. Estimated avoided losses. He blinked. Over $12 million? I nodded. Approximately. You never reported this? I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to keep operations running. The room changes. Something shifted. Yesterday, people saw me as a systems analyst. Today, they were looking at someone who had quietly become essential to the company's success. The vice president leaned back. I've been here 12 years. He looked around the room. I had absolutely no idea one employee was carrying this much operational risk. Neither did anyone else. A question that changed everything. The CFO looked directly at Derek. Were you aware Ethan was handling these issues? Derek answered carefully. I knew he was proactive. The room almost laughed. Proactive? That wasn't the word. The IT director spoke. If Ethan had taken a normal vacation without checking emails, he looked around. How exposed would we have been? Nobody answered, because everyone already knew. Very, very exposed. The hidden truth. The vice president looked back at me. Ethan, I need you to answer honestly. When was the last time you took more than 3 consecutive days off? I thought about it. About 3 years ago. The HR director frowned. You've accumulated that much unused vacation? Yes. Why? I smiled. Because every time I planned time off, something critical happened. The room grew quiet again. The HR director shook her head. That's not sustainable. No, it isn't. The investigation begins. By noon, the executive meeting ended. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. HR announced a formal review. Internal audit requested copies of every email. Infrastructure pulled server logs. Legal asked for communication records. Forensic backups were created. Nothing was being left to memory anymore. Everything would be verified. Derek walked out without saying a word. For the first time since he'd become manager, he had no control over the situation. An unexpected offer. That afternoon, the vice president stopped by my desk again. Ethan, do you have a minute? Of course. He smiled. I'd like to discuss your future here. I wasn't sure where this was going. He continued. We've realized something. Our systems don't need someone who quietly fixes problems. They need someone empowered to prevent them. I stayed silent. He slid another folder across the table. Inside was a proposal. Senior Systems Reliability Lead. It was a brand new position. One that didn't even exist the day before. The salary increase caught my attention. Nearly 30%. Better bonus. Remote flexibility. Authority to stop risky deployments. Direct access to executive leadership. No middle management approval required. I looked up. This is unexpected. He smiled. I don't think you've been compensated for the value you've been providing. One last conversation. As I left the meeting room, I saw Derek standing near the elevators. He looked exhausted. He motioned for me to come over. Ethan. I walked over. I owe you an apology. This time, his voice sounded genuine. I let my ego get in the way. I thought I needed to prove I was in control. I should have listened. For a moment, I believed he meant every word. Then he asked, if they ask, could you mention that we've worked well together before this? There it was. Even now, he was still trying to protect himself. I answered calmly. If they ask me questions, I'll answer honestly. He lowered his head. He already knew what that meant. 3 days later, the company-wide email everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The subject line was simple: Organizational Update. People stopped what they were doing and opened it immediately. The announcement stated that Derek was no longer with the company. There were no details, no explanation, just one short paragraph thanking him for his service. A second announcement followed moments later. I was being promoted to Senior Systems Reliability Lead, reporting directly to the IT Director instead of Operations. The room erupted into applause. Lisa walked over with a huge grin. "I've been waiting for this day." I laughed. "So have I." Building something better. The promotion wasn't just a new title. The executives actually listened to the recommendations I'd been making for years. Within 2 months, a formal early warning monitoring system was deployed. Critical risks automatically notified executive leadership. Every technical concern required documented acknowledgement. Employees were encouraged to report issues instead of staying silent. Cross-team collaboration replaced rigid departmental boundaries. One person could no longer ignore a serious technical warning. The system itself demanded accountability. Ironically, the outage that had cost the company hundreds of thousands of dollars became the catalyst for making the company stronger. An unexpected phone call. About 6 months later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" A familiar voice answered. "Ethan, it's Derek." There was an awkward silence. "I heard about the improvements." "Yeah. I also heard you're leading the reliability team now." "That's right." He sighed. "I wanted to tell you something." I waited. I've spent months thinking about what happened. I blamed you at first, but eventually I realized you did exactly what I told you to do. He paused again. I confused authority with leadership. I thought giving orders made me a good manager. I was wrong. For the first time, it didn't sound like someone trying to save his reputation. It sounded like someone who had finally learned from his mistakes. I simply replied, "I hope things work out for you." "I appreciate that." We ended the call on respectful terms. Not as friends, not as enemies. Just two people whose careers had crossed paths and changed forever. Looking back, sometimes people ask if I regret not spending 15 minutes fixing the problem that day. The honest answer? For a long time, yes. Watching coworkers deal with the chaos wasn't enjoyable. Customer service representatives took the abuse. Warehouse workers stayed late. Drivers waited for shipments that never printed. None of them deserved that. But another part of me knows the truth. If I had quietly fixed the issue again, nothing would have changed. Derek would have continued ignoring warnings. Executives would never have realized how much risk the company was carrying. The company would have kept depending on invisible overtime and unpaid effort from employees who were never recognized. Eventually, a much larger disaster would have happened. Sometimes solving the immediate problem only delays the real one. The biggest lesson. That experience changed how I think about work. Being a good employee doesn't mean sacrificing yourself endlessly. Helping your team is important, but constantly covering for broken leadership only hides deeper problems. A healthy workplace doesn't rely on heroes. It relies on systems. Systems that allow people to speak up. Systems that value expertise. Systems that reward honesty instead of ego. Once those systems were finally in place, the company became stronger than it had ever been. And surprisingly, so did I. For the first time in years, I actually took a 2-week vacation. When I came back, nothing had fallen apart. That was the greatest success of all. Lesson from the story. Sometimes, the greatest act of professionalism isn't fixing every problem yourself. It's refusing to hide problems that leadership needs to see. Real leaders listen to expertise. They don't silence it. And karma has a funny way of teaching that lesson to people who refuse to learn it the easy way. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been in my position, would you have ignored your boss's order and fixed the issue anyway? Or would you have done exactly what I did and let management face the consequences of its own decisions? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe to Karma Stories Hub Official, and comment below telling me what you would have done in this situation. Your support really helps the channel grow.